From the fire that Trump has lit around the world, many people will now be convinced that the only sound democratic model to follow will be that of China. I say this with a lot of thought and at some times trepidation. Don't get distracted by the Trump tariff numbers like the ones here. For decades, USA had been getting uncomfortable with the Chinese expansion in manufacturing. So this was coming. Trump is simply giving it a personification. On these journeys of one point, as a maverick observer of the economy, it gives me great pleasure to know that you are with me, and to know that there are new episodes coming up. It works best if you click on the bell icon every time, because that tells you that a new episode is up. And now onwards with our story. Have you seen this headline, "To Russia with cash"? That is on Wall Street Journal. You wouldn't have believed, I wouldn't have believed that the world has changed so much, but yes, it has. Russia is now writing legal documents to welcome back foreign companies which had left Russia due to the sanctions imposed by the Russia-Ukraine war. But while significant as this may sound, this is nothing compared to the welcome party that China is mounting for investors, for the global population to turn eastwards. Look at these Bloomberg headlines. President Xi Jinping is pushing on what is called a charm offensive, and this will not be one-off. You might say that when I am saying that China is going to be hugely popular with countries across the world, am I overstating the case? Am I just saying that just because Trump as a one-time president has created a global uncertainty on trade, these things would follow? Well, actually it's not so. If you look at this article by Thomas Friedman about how China is shooting up the AI race, you would understand the scale at which this country has been squaring up in its fight with USA. Well, USA was looking at trade war and how to maximize gains from the trade war. China was opening up several fronts. It was opening up cyber attacks or cyber issues. It was opening up continental control by looking at South China Sea, expanding its reach. It's also thought about what to do regarding currencies. So there is a lot that goes on in the sphere which USA had not factored in. Now, the last time around in the Second World War, what happened when countries were actually in a real war, hot war, the Allied powers, the USA, Britain and others were basically working on the fact that there was no collaboration between Germany, Japan and Italy against these countries. And plus, in terms of technology, there was only one time ahead that they were there in technology, but it wasn't really great. But this time around, the change is on several other fronts. The first thing is, it is not going to be a hot war in the sense that people will actually clash on the ground. There could be, but I don't think that's a significant thing. China, for instance, is raising what is called a volt typhoon. And before you get surprised, there's also the salt typhoon. What's a volt typhoon? A volt typhoon is an attack, a cyber attack on utilities, ports, powerhouses, ships, supply chains. This doesn't cost people in terms of their lives, but it costs in terms of economic cost, the huge amount of money that will be lost. To recover that will take years. These are the sort of preparations that is happening. And already the space is the place where we are getting to see countries getting smarter by shooting down satellites. So there is a lot that is happening which is behind the curtain, and frankly speaking, we are not sure whether the democratic upholder which USA was with EU are really prepared. In fact, that brings me to the second point, that the European Union or the larger European landmass is today effectively a second China state. On most global issues, EU does not take an anti-China position. It doesn't. You would have noticed that in the China-India trade-off, the European support to us was not unequivocal, and is going to be more and more so, especially now with USA clearly saying that it is not going to support Europe as a matter of implicit trust and policy. These countries are basically gravitating towards China. That's a big thing to say, but yes, they are gravitating towards China. So if they are gravitating towards China, what happens to Asia and what happens to Africa? Well, I would say that Asia would be the battleground, but Africa would be probably be a lesser battleground. The African countries have far less capacity to handle competing financial support, and those countries would be moving in. So that brings me to an economic theory. This is called the Schelling's theorem. In the Schelling's theorem, and remember these economic theories came up during the just after the Second World War, because war was in the air and everybody is thinking about them. It's interesting that again these theories are now sort of in front of us when the next war is looking inevitable in any other form or shape. What does the Schelling theorem say? In a game theoretic construct, when people do not have effective communication with each other, they move to what is called a focal point, the central point. It happens in lots of cases, we have seen in real life, but it now happen vis-a-vis countries. Countries without any effective communication with each other and with USA or with Europe, each now looking for its own strategic interest, will gravitate towards a central position, the focal position. And what is this focal position? Essentially a China-led order. You might call it very surprising, but it actually will be known as the China-led democratic order. This is something that is becoming very, very certain. What's the third part to it? The role of India. Well, India by definition, by the way it looks at the world, follows a principle of diversity. Whichever thing happens in India, and you can see examples all around, there is a lot of diverse opinion and diverse commentary that goes on in India on anything. And this is something which is so differentiating India from the rest of the world. It is going to differentiate India especially on and in a very significant way in the educational campuses, because diversity of opinion is most strong when students are coming in, because that's the time of their life when they are extremely willing and able to take on competing ideologies. So you would see that happening. And what does that mean? Countries across the world will now and will be looking at this thing very carefully, that they will be choosing between a growth pattern, that is India, and the Indian growth story is actually very fast now compared to a period earlier when India was seen as a counterpoint to China, but that was a time when both were poor countries and China raced ahead. This time a new game is taking up where India is actually able to hold its own, yet with a diversity index which is far higher than the rest of the world. In fact, the world often doesn't measure the diversity index, but with that sort of an index, India will be sufficiently ahead. So the only counterpoint to China, as I said, in Asia, which is actually the real battleground in this world, will be India. So there will be the India camp, there will be the China camp. How does that play out? Well, that's for another episode of On Point. Until then, all the best. For a detailed description of what we discussed here, please visit my Substack. The link is in the description below. Thank you.